Our story begins in Real Develum, year 3D 992, where a young elf girl called Peepee, unironically, was hiding inside a cargo entering the city, as she was looking forward to having a brighter future there. Little did she know that the city itself wasn't doing so good, and now Peepee found herself caught in the middle of a purge, only to be saved by her half-brother Kurenzel, who was in turn saved by Wide, just before he could do anything stupid, albeit he had to bribe the corrupt monk to save these youngsters. That evening, Peepee found herself getting castigated by her brother for ruining his plans to stow away. In return, Wide did castigate her and her brother for attempting such a half-assed attempt to flee the city, with Kurenzel getting most of the blame, which he didn't appreciate, nor appreciated being called as Little Hero. Despite that, Peepee remained fixated on wanting to leave the city, especially after losing everything she had there. Before she could say another word, however, Kurenzel threw his daughter in the waterway after taking notice of 13 soldiers heading towards them. To Wide's surprise, Kurenzel's intuition was correct. There were indeed soldiers coming to apprehend them, unless they gave them some virtues as well, not to say bribe, that is. Seeing that the escapees are not willing to cooperate, the guards attack them, only to be surprised by the fact that their counterparts could also fight. Wide in particular was surprised by the immense power that Kurenzel had. Once the latter was done with finishing off all of his opponents, and before Wide could get any proper answer from Kurenzel about his identity and background, a wild Peepee came out of the waterway just in time to learn that Wide had agreed to smuggle her and her brother outside the city. Indeed, Wide took the two through a small boat under the city's fortifications, since it has been turned into a home for vagrants. Kurenzel couldn't help but enjoy having a good meal there, while people there couldn't help but notice how filthy he and his sister were. While they were at it, Wide managed to convince the smugglers' leader, Altia, to make a discount for these two kids to get them out. In her meeting with Kurenzel, however, things didn't go as well as she thought, as Kurenzel wasn't eager to cooperate with her. That is until Altia mentioned that he won't be able to catch up with the 7 heroes outside. Meanwhile, the city guards seem to be gathering their forces at the inn that Kurenzel is sheltering in. Getting here was doable thanks to a tiny pipsqueak that snitched on Altia, who tried to deny being a smuggler, but to no avail. Naturally, as is the case with any corrupt figure, the monks rewarded the snitch by sending him to the afterlife early on, before getting to attack the armless civilians inside, who among them was none other than Peepee. Before the monk could send her after that snitch, however, Kurenzel arrived just in time to eliminate multiple enemies at once. The monk, who was getting increasingly frustrated by this turn of events, had introduced himself as one of the 7 heroes, and that defying him is a major offense. As Kurenzel went to make sure that his sister was fine, the monk ran for his life, as he was thinking that this disaster will cost him dearly if his higher-ups ever hear that his entire army got wiped out by a single kid. As such, he declared martial law. To make sure that he won't let them escape the city, the fat monk paid dearly to get plenty of power from someone called Rangzats. Meanwhile, Altia tried to convince Kurenzel to not leave the city for the time being, since security is even tighter now, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. As such, she decided to get him and his sister to move through one secret passage that the city's church doesn't know of. And despite Kurenzel not liking how smelly the way was, Altia insisted that this is the only way possible to catch up with the latest ship. Although the first few goblins were not that much of a threat, the behemoth that came their way next made Altia paralyzed from terror, so much that Wide had to intervene to save her. Kurenzel even tried to attack the monster on his own initiative, and he certainly caused a great deal of harm on the monster that it gave hope to Altia. Unfortunately for her, however, this hope was quickly dashed when the monster got rid of Kurenzel, thus leaving her inconsolable. To make matters worse, Peepee woke up to learn that her brother got eliminated. Just as things were looking bleak, Wide decided to step in, as he expressed that he wasn't angry at Altia, but incredibly disappointed at her for giving up. To his credit, Wide tried his best to attack the monster, but he was still put out of commission with one strike. Just as the monster was on the verge of finishing off Altia and Peepee, Kurenzel surprised absolutely nobody other than his sister and the smuggler by not only being alive, but by taking down the monster with one swing of a sword. What neither he nor his fellows could see coming, however, was the fact that they were about to get attacked, hadn't he noticed that on the last possible second by Rangzats. Naturally, that fat monk had to get himself involved by being a bootlicker for Rangzats and his magical sword. If that wasn't enough, Peepee and Kurenzel ended up struggling with the magic he had in his sword. After all, Rangzats used to be one of Kurenzel's kind before converting to that monk's cult. When she heard that, Altia was furious for his treason to his former allies, and even went as far as to refuse the monk's request to follow in his footsteps and convert, in exchange for mercy. As such, Rangzats attacked the smugglers. To the monk's surprise, however, Kurenzel managed to repel the attack somehow. Despite that, he and his sister were badly shaken by the sounds they could hear from Rangzats's magical sword, so much so Kurenzel began to cry from the sounds he heard. Pipi also added that this sound they're hearing is coming from the elf scream on that sword. All things were seeming to go well for the fat monk, when Rangzats decided to make a U-turn since his job was done. The petty Wide Walker insisted that Rangzats still attack Kurenzel time and again, and even agreed to pay extra for it against his better judgment. This time Kurenzel wasn't able to fully repel the enemy attack, as it did throw him into the 9th layer of hell, while burying his comrades and sister under the rubble. Seeing this, on top of the monk's satisfaction, Rangzats decided to head home, albeit he remained confident that this would never be his last encounter with Altia. Speaking of which, Altia and Pipi were saved by Wide, who decided to get back inside the city to save a friend, while remaining certain that Kurenzel will do well on his own. Indeed, Kurenzel was fine, but he still had to encounter that same Wide Walker monk. He figured out that Kurenzel could recover his injuries using moonlight, so he decided to attack him in this area where he'll have no access to view the moon using his elitist troops. However, Kurenzel couldn't help but have a flashback of his own, where an old man called Urgnack had cast a spell of his own on him before peacing out. Before long, he found himself engaged in battle with the elite troops, who have turned out to be a tougher nut to crack than expected. The monk urged his men to take their opponent down, only to find that Kurenzel had got past them with ease, and he's now in hot pursuit after the monk. The monk was so disturbed by this turn of events that he ended up tripping on the ground. To make matters worse, his last hope of having the elite troops finishing off Kurenzel were completely shattered when he witnessed their end, using a trap that was long set in this dungeon. This has left the monk apoplectic, as he didn't expect that Kurenzel would be familiar with this dungeon. In fact, it was thanks to Urgnack that he learned everything about this dungeon, including what lies beyond the doors behind the monk, which turned out to be the Tree of Saint Urgnack. Although aware of that, Kurenzel was frustrated that Urgnack's self-sacrifice to protect the city had been rewarded by making him an attendant by some corrupt priests. The further Kurenzel attempted to approach his former master, the more he became consumed with grief and sorrow. As it turned out, according to the two Wide Walkers, Urgnack used to be one of the 7 heroes of this city. One day, they were in the middle of an expedition inside the Forest of Death, where they got ambushed by soldiers from the Kingdom of Wishtek. The survivors could never forsake this land, so they decided to protect it with their lives. Back then, Kurenzel, who was known as Ascheriit, had decided to accompany Urgnack. Despite the pleas of his comrades not to do that, Ascheriit insisted he accompany his master, while promising that he'll reunite with everyone else once the mission has been completed. This promise has never been fulfilled. From afar, a certain merchant, who's now the Grand Priest, had been mortified by the sight of Urgnack's self-sacrifice, so he decided to build a monastery around his corpse, as a way to keep it as a holy site. Despite that, Kurenzel kept on talking to the stunned body of his master, while recollecting the good old days they had with their comrades, which eventually made him furious as he remembered their betrayal to some of them. Once he bid farewell to his master's corpse, Kurenzel pointed his sword at the heart of the temple. The higher priest urged that fat excuse of a monk to stop him, but as he did try to do so himself, he ended up doing Kurenzel's work for him, thus beginning the destruction of the magical barrier of the city. Naturally, Rasheb, yes that's the monk's name, I just realized it now, decided to take shelter behind his boss's back from the falling rubbles. The destruction of the monastery and the wall's aftermath were instantaneous, as a huge crowd of armed citizens took over the city instantly. Meanwhile, Kurenzel began recollecting some more memories about the raison d'etre of a certain place in the monastery, where he sacrificed himself, leaving Kurenzel to continue his mission with his fellow comrades. Now with his master gone for good, however, Kurenzel had sworn to get rid of the 7 traitors that led to this ongoing ordeal. As he left, Rangzats was watching him from a distance, with Rasheb trying so hard to get out of the rubble. The sorry excuse of a man was happy that he now became the highest-ranking priest of the city, as he urged Rangzats to help him. What he didn't know, however, was the fact that his brutal and corrupt policies have got people to hate him so much that they want to cut him to pieces. Seeing the writings on the wall, Rangzats decided to turn his back on his now former employer. By now, chaos was the order of the day. As the guards were desperately trying to get into the last empty ship to leave the city, Wide managed to capture it with his friends and finally leave. From afar, Altia began to look bitterly at the end of her smuggling business. Peepee, on the other hand, was concerned about her brother's well-being, only for him to appear riding a flying dragon, which he definitely and absolutely didn't steal. From afar, the Empire's citizens were looking at the destruction of the magical wall in horror, before resorting to their great 7 heroes for protection. However, one of the heroes, Glenn, was aware that Stamerlech, the guy that led the elimination of his comrades, was afraid, so he decided to assure him that everything will be fine. At the Moon Temple, Mondenborgen, the lunar priestess, was in the middle of her prayer when she felt something ominous that shook her to the core, as she became aware that the cosmic laws will be altered forever. Meanwhile, Kurenzel was rushing to the temple where the Great Seven were located when he got suddenly attacked by one of the 7 heroes. What the hero and Glee, the nerd archer that shot Kurenzel, didn't expect was that they made Kurenzel fall into the 7 heroes' temple. The townsfolk were furious by Kurenzel's insolence and began to demand that the half-elf get executed. Glenn, however, decided to pardon him, arguing that this young boy must have suffered a lot during the warring times and that he deserves all the support and care in the world. After heading back to the temple, the crowds began cheering for Glenn as their lord, while Kurenzel stood speechless at what had just transpired before his very eyes. After all, Glenn had all of this fortune, fame and prestige over the corpses of the 4 comrades that he had eliminated with his own hands. A while later, after shooting down Kurenzel from his dragon, Rosen was surprised when he learned that Glenn had spared his life. As he was walking away in disgrace, Kurenzel got attacked by a mysterious figure. Elsewhere, Wide was struggling to keep his ship flying when he got also attacked by that same mysterious flying object that attacked Kurenzel. It turned out that it was none other than Princess Ott that was leading the attack, albeit neither Kurenzel nor Wide knew of that yet. Seeing that Kurenzel was struggling in this fight, Wide decided to help, only to lose control over the ship entirely and have it falling down. Fortunately, Wide kept the ship intact, but he couldn't make it in time to save Kurenzel. Instead, it was Peepee that arrived just in time to prevent Ott from eliminating her brother. Just as she was about to eliminate both half-elf siblings, Wide identified who Ott was and addressed her accordingly. Meanwhile, Rosen and his subordinates were talking about what had led him to go after Kurenzel. After all, he managed to annihilate an entire army on his own, with Lord Krat in the lead. This devastating blow made Ott so furious that she swore to avenge her lord. As she was on the verge of attacking Peepee and Kurenzel in one go, the latter stood up in the nick of time to repel the first attack with his leg, before charging towards Ott and breaking her head's shield. Seeing Kurenzel's bloodlust up close, Ott lost her will to fight, while Kurenzel fell unconscious. As such, Wide took him to a safe shelter to recover. What he didn't know, however, was that this place had one of the 7 heroes' subordinates, namely Jiren, that was after Kurenzel was already there. It didn't take long for him to learn from the mayor himself about what happened to the city, which made him vow to make sure that no one will dare disturb the peace there. For the time being, Peepee was wandering in the city's refugee camp when she ran across another boy of her kind. He introduced himself as Zephy, but when she was about to introduce herself, Altia came in, calling her out as Peepee. Before Altia could figure out who Zephy is, his parents arrived. They had known who Altia was since she was the one that helped them escape the city years ago. However, Altia couldn't remember who they were, nor could she admit that. One thing was certain, however, Altia couldn't help but have tears of joy for seeing how positively she impacted other people's lives thanks to her smuggling business. While Altia was busy crying her eyes out, Zephy suggested that Peepee come with him, as other people of their kind were planning to build an entire village of their own in a remote yet safe area. Simultaneously, Kurenzel woke up to Wide sitting next to him, while Ott was blaming him for siding with her brother's killer, and even going as far as to call him out as a traitor. Hearing this, Kurenzel handed her over his sword and asked her to eliminate him if that's what she so desperately wanted. However, he found himself getting punched in the face by Wide, as he reminded him that he still has a score to settle. As such, Wide cannot afford to have Kurenzel lose his life before that. Wide also declared that he needs Kurenzel also to save a certain princess called Jiren, the second princess of the House of Keshalundo, Ott's older sister. Apparently she went to strike an alliance with some other tribe, only to end up getting kidnapped by some thugs. To make sure that Kurenzel is back in shape, he reminds him that he's the man of the black sword, who cut down an entire army to a man single-handedly. 3 days later, Kurenzel was standing alone in the middle of the camp when his sister came to cheer him up with some soup, as well as inform him that she'll be leaving with Zephy. However, on top of his indifference, Kurenzel turned hostile when he first noticed Jiren's presence, only to let his guard down when he learned from Peepee that this centurion will be the one to carry them to their new village. What neither siblings nor their specimen in the camp knew, however, was that Jiren and his comrades were preparing to get rid of every half-elf he came across, a fact that only Zephy became aware of. As for Wide, he instantly identified Jiren as the man that kidnapped Princess Jiren, so he immediately took matters into his own hands and attacked. Despite that, Jiren insisted that he's a man of honor that seeks nothing but protecting others, even going as far as to punch the men that were in pursuit of Zephy after discovering their secret. Before the kids could make a sigh of relief, more soldiers arrived at the scene, only for Jiren to reveal that he bears the crest of Lord Stemmerlech. That didn't make any difference to the thugs, as they were equipped with longer daggers that carried the same crest. Seeing that Jiren is now caught in a predicament, the thugs began to approach to take Zephy with them. What they didn't know, however, was that Kurenzel was also there, and instantly cut them to pieces before they could lay a finger on Zephy. Shocked by this show of force, the thugs charged once more at Kurenzel, only to meet the same result once again. Kurenzel couldn't help but mock their Lord Stemmerlech for not coming to their protection, and even went as far as to destroy the dagger that had this sorry sight of a lord's crest in a heartbeat, not to mention his hand. As he was in so much pain, the thug resorted to Jiren, hoping that he'll do his dirty work for him, as he carried the Landgrave's crest as well. Jiren, however, opted instead to interrogate the thug about how he got that crest to begin with. Before Jiren could ask any questions, his brother, Fargo, arrived at the scene. The thug felt relieved as he approached him for protection, only for Fargo to eliminate him in a heartbeat, much to everyone's dismay. As it turned out, Fargo came in to look for the dagger with the crest that he requested, although it was now destroyed. Nevertheless, Fargo couldn't help but be grateful to Kurenzel for dealing with the bandits. With the issue now being solved, Fargo gave orders to clear the scene from the bandits' bodies. Not all was well, however, as Wide remained the only skeptical person in the area. After addressing his concerns about Princess Shasen's safety and her kidnapping, Fargo promised that he'll arrange a meeting for him and her. In fact, Fargo was on a mission to secure those in possession of special powers from all the borderlands. To make sure that he keeps Wide on side, Fargo informs Wide that he'll be at the mayor's mansion if he ever wants to meet him. Although taken aback by this whole meeting, and despite his skepticism, Wide passed the news to Aunt about the ability to meet up with her sister. As for the hostages, Jiren arrived to punch their guards, and assure the hostages that he means no harm to them, just like a mom stares at her kid while assuring him safety after he messed up big time. As for the hostages, they were thankful to Zephy for freeing them up, and not for Jiren who had done most of the work. While Kurenzel and Altia were busy making their last preparations to part ways the next day, and Pee complaining about how everyone went astray before parting ways tomorrow, Wide and Ott went to the mayor's mansion to meet with Princess Shasen, where they were welcomed by a bunch of angry zombie bandits. Only then Wide realized that he had been lured into a trap. Ott's decision to stand and fight instead of retreating proved good, however, as her timely intervention saved Wide from a gloomy fate. This wasn't the end of it, however, as the zombies were resurrecting time and again thanks to the magic they had. To add insult to injury, the duo found themselves surrounded now, while the zombies were getting more buffs from the moonlights. As he was watching these developments from the mansion's window, Fargo was getting incredibly frustrated that Zephy had thwarted his plans after freeing the hostages. With his crest being broken, he decided to finally make his move. While Zephy was sleeping with his parents safe and sound, Kurenzel woke up to the sight of the two moons crossing paths. As for Pee, she was having traumatizing memories of her village getting burned to the ground, before reminiscing about the few good memories she had with Zephy's parents, who fed her and gave her clothes, unaware that the peacefully sleeping family is about to meet a gruesome end by Fargo. The bastard eliminated Zephy's mother instantly, but ended up breaking the tent as he tried to get rid of the father, who revealed Fargo's face before following his wife's path. Pee was horrified by this display of bloodlust. Kurenzel also took notice of what's going on and headed there instantly. Despite their fierce resistance, Wide and Ott get overwhelmed by the horde of zombies, but before they get to finish off the duo, Ott's dragon arrives just in time to save them and take them out of this mess. Fargo also attempted to finish off Zephy for good, only for Pee to attempt to stop him with a piece of wood as her weapon. Furious after learning that Fargo had lied about his promises for land and protection, Pee went ahead in a pathetic attempt to attack the evil lord, only to be kicked away with ease. For spoiling his fun, Fargo used his magic to manipulate Zephy's dead parents to get rid of Pee for him. The moment Zephy woke up, he got attacked by this demon. Just as it was on the verge of eliminating Pee, however, Kurenzel arrived just in time to save her. As Pee began to complain to him about Zephy's parents' hopes and dreams for a bright future, he began to understand how sorrowful Pee was. As such, Kurenzel pulled his own demon, who, after apologizing to Zephy's parents, eliminated them. Fargo was horrified by this sight and tried desperately to fend off Kurenzel, but his pleas fell on deaf ears as Kurenzel literally cut off his right arm. Fargo, although in so much pain, was enraged by the fact that a demi-human attacked him, completely disregarding the atrocities he committed against them. Hearing that Fargo was completely willing to dump on the legacy of the honorable soldiers that sacrificed themselves to protect the civilians of this city, Kurenzel had finally made up his mind. Before he could make a move, however, the refugees arrived with whatever they could pick in defense of Fargo. Assuming that Kurenzel was the villain that's trying to get rid of their lord and savior, the citizens attempted to eliminate him. Kurenzel was on the verge of eliminating his attackers, but Wide's arrival had prevented him from doing so, as he simply picked his hand and fled the scene, leaving Pipi to her fate with Zephy. Once they were in a safe area, Wide was glad that Kurenzel had gotten back to his usual self. Kurenzel, on the other hand, got to persuade Ott that he still got some scores to settle, while assuring her that she could eliminate him once he's done. A while later, Ott approached Kurenzel to apologize to him for trying to eliminate him, as she pointed out that she's now thankful for saving her brother Krat by eliminating him. Kurenzel accepted her apology and promised that she doesn't have to do anything to redeem herself, since he was willing to leave everything she did in the past. Back in the camp, Pipi was desperately trying to convince the elders of the city that Kurenzel was defending her and Zephy from Fargo. Seeing that her pleas fell on deaf ears, Pipi left the tent frustrated, with Jiren seeing things from afar. At the temple, Stemmerlech was summoned by his Rosen to learn about the events that took place, especially about his encounter with Kurenzel, which Stemmerlech dismissed as nonsense. After all, what is a demi-human of the Borderlands in comparison to the mighty Stemmerlech of the Seven Heroes? This didn't sound too reassuring for Rosen, and neither were the city's guards' confidence. It didn't take long for Stemmerlech to begin seriously considering taking actions against Kurenzel, especially after bearing witness to Fargo after losing an arm. As such, he ordered that the city's guards get mobilized immediately. As everyone braced themselves for Kurenzel's anticipated attack, Rosen was growing increasingly worried about the Landgrave's future with Kurenzel being alive. Once Kurenzel was spotted, the guards began to act immediately. Despite the immense defenses, Kurenzel assured Wide that they'll be able to break through them with ease. Meanwhile, the city's generals issued their order to use their Wunder weapon. Although everyone was taken aback by the massive size of this weapon, Kurenzel, however, remained undaunted by it, as he already knew about its existence, as it was used to wipe out entire armies from Wishtek. Despite many people thinking that deploying such a weapon against a mere demi-human, many others were so eager to use it, including Stemmerlech, who couldn't resist making ironic thrusts at Fargo constantly. As the enemy kept on driving them closer to the secret weapon's range, Kurenzel began to think about his past with repairing this weapon before the Seven Heroes' betrayal. Back then, Kurenzel was impressed by how good of a blacksmith Stemmerlech was, despite being a former bandit. Before long, Kurenzel took a detour and began to fly much closer to the building where Stemmerlech was. The more the defenders were displaying their tenacity and discipline, the sadder Kurenzel became, as he was not willing to eliminate his former comrades, whom he had fought with previously. Seeing that he's now in range of the secret weapon, Kurenzel decided to go for broke and use his demonic black sword to charge straight towards the cannon. The defenders, as well as their lord, were ecstatic to see their arch-nemesis burn to ashes. However, their hopes were dashed when Kurenzel and his comrades not only emerged from the fire unscathed, but left Rosen completely baffled when he realized that he might have succeeded to infiltrate the fort. He was right. As Kurenzel advanced inside the underground passages of the mansion, Wide began to get much more surprised by how Kurenzel knew about every bit of detail of it, potentially even more than any of its soldiers. That was the case until they ran across Jiren in one of the secret passages. To their surprise, Jiren had revealed to them that Smuggler and Fargo were inside the deepest part of the mansion. Why would he do this, you might ask? It turned out that Jiren learned about Fargo's schemes, and since he doesn't want to stand with evil anymore, he decided to turn against him, even though he gave him a raison d'etre. As Jiren revealed regrettably that he took Princess Shason to meet a horrible fate inside the mansion. Wide was livid when he heard this, while Ott remained skeptical about the entire story. However, Kurenzel believed that Jiren was trying to redeem himself and come to terms with what he had done. As such, he ordered Jiren to take them to where Stemmerlech and Fargo were. To achieve this, Jiren disguised Kurenzel as a femboy. I may or may not be making fun of the guy, but even his friends almost had a crush on him, much to Kurenzel's frustration. Nevertheless, Kurenzel agreed to let Jiren fulfill one request of his, which is to accompany them personally, instead of letting the guards do so. Inside the mansion's core, Stemmerlech was attempting to treat Fargo's deteriorating wound. Once Jiren arrived there and made his request to the guards, Fargo came groaning in pain to check on what Jiren wanted. Only then the latter asked Fargo about what did he drag him into, as well as the fate that the maidens he brought him had met. Fargo pretended to be oblivious initially, but revealed his true colors when Jiren revealed that he saw his heinous crime against Zephy and his parents. It turned out that Fargo had been hunting down demihumans to use their blood for demonic creations. He initially wanted to keep it as a secret, but ended up using this newly discovered power of his to assist the 7 heroes. Ott could see that he was lying through his teeth, but Jiren believed him when he was promised that he was telling the truth. Thanks to that, Fargo managed to dissuade Jiren from learning what lies inside the mansion's core, which I assume are a bunch of core memes. What Fargo failed to realize earlier, however, was the fact that Jiren brought Kurenzel and the others with him. By the time he learned of that, he ruthlessly attacked Jiren. Before he could deliver the death blow, Kurenzel intervened. Seeing that his situation is now abysmal, Fargo made it worse by publicly insulting and degrading Jiren for being an unassuming good-natured man. By now, however, Kurenzel was having none of it, as he claimed that he had clearly made a mistake by sparing his life earlier. In a last-ditch effort to save himself, Fargo attempted to strike a deal with Kurenzel, where he could get Shason back, in exchange for safe passage outside the mansion. Kurenzel refused, as he made it clear that he'll only take her and eliminate Fargo anyway, since he has no reason to strike a deal with some subhuman like that. Realizing that his fate is now sealed, Fargo revealed what he did to the demihuman girls he received from Jiren previously. Food Kurenzel, this was the last straw. With hostilities now resuming, Kurenzel found his back against the wall, as Fargo's attacks were fast, on top of relentless. As Wide became aware that Kurenzel cannot use his black sword without enough moonlight, he and Ott found themselves getting attacked as well. After tossing Jiren away to a safer distance, literally he got tossed away, the trio got to surround Fargo. Unexpectedly, Kurenzel found himself disarmed and pinned by Fargo, but just as he was about to meet his end, Jiren handed him over his dagger, which he used to devastating effect. Although Wide was happy about this turn of events, he wasn't sure about what to do with Jiren, especially after his involvement in Fargo's schemes. As such, Kurenzel decided to get everyone to move and leave Jiren to his fate. While Kurenzel and his goons were on their way to Stemmerlech, the former couldn't help but reminisce about the good memories he had with the latter, and those that helped with building this mansion and its secret weapon. By now, Stemmerlech was in utter shock when he heard about Kurenzel's infiltration. Still, he remained confident that Fargo will come back victorious and come back with his rewards any minute now. He was also pleased with the fact that Fargo's men had brought up a black-haired demihuman with them, who was none other than Shason. Although Stemmerlech didn't know that, he was impressed by the fact that the people from her tribe possess exceptionally potent fairy blood. As such, Stemmerlech ordered that further research be done over her and what useful her blood could be. Before the researchers could even start doing that, however, because Kurenzel arrived at the scene, and he was angry. Seeing this, Stemmerlech became furious at Fargo's failure. Still, he was confident that he could deal with Kurenzel personally. Although he was taken aback by how Kurenzel could tell where he was and who he's talking to, since he had changed from how he was 2 decades ago, that didn't matter because Kurenzel is now caught in a predicament. The princess is now having tests performed on her. Wide and Ott rushed to save her, only for the researchers to reveal, under Stemmerlech's orders, the countless amounts of skulls of the demihumans they've eliminated. For some reason, he expected that the trio would praise him instead of insulting him for all the deaths he had brought upon innocent civilians. After all, he's one of the 7 heroes, and he could do nothing wrong, right? This has gotten Kurenzel to become even more convinced that his decision to go after Stemmerlech was right all along, as he saw him getting angry for seeing Wide and Ott saving their princess. As such, he began attacking his former comrade, only for his opponent to dodge Kurenzel's attacks. After a long ramble about how great a person he is, Stemmerlech began to attack Kurenzel relentlessly, while the latter kept on dodging every single one of his attacks as best he could. Despite taking a hit from his opponent, Kurenzel managed to also land a hit on Stemmerlech as well, before capitalizing on this opportunity and landing another critical hit on him. As he further took Stemmerlech aback by his ability to keep up with his attacks, and as he took even more hits and slashes, the latter began to find Kurenzel's swordsmanship familiar. By the time he realized Kurenzel's true identity, Ascheriit, Kurenzel used his black sword to paralyze Stemmerlech. Before he deals the final blow against him, Kurenzel reminded Stemmerlech of how he backstabbed his Kurenzel's master before hacking him down to pieces. Just as Kurenzel was on the verge of finishing off the traitor, a horde of manipulated elves came in to prevent him from doing so with force. Surrounded, exhausted, and in no shape whatsoever to fight, Kurenzel found his nemesis coming in to ask him about how he achieved this new physique, as if he was asking your average gym bro, much to Kurenzel's dismay. If that wasn't enough, Kurenzel began to hear the deep down voices coming from those manipulated demihumans, which made him fall unconscious. Seeing this, Stemmerlich requested from the High Priest to get to study Kurenzel as thoroughly as he wants, since he now wants to establish the secret for eternal youth. Before he could get to do so, Kurenzel began to laugh menacingly, as he unleashed a monster from within him to eliminate 2 of the High Priest's subordinates. Meanwhile, Shason got woken up by this new aura of power that Kurenzel had unleashed. This had also affected the manipulated fairies around him, to the point that Stemmerlich forced them to attack Kurenzel. The latter, however, was so out of control that he began to eliminate everyone on sight. Amidst this mayhem, Stemmerlich found himself stuck under rubble. Shason was surprised when she saw that Kurenzel stopped attacking, as he became briefly relieved to see the suffering souls finally being at peace before getting back to attack the enemy priests. Seeing that he was left alone, Stemmerlich remained helpless before this approaching behemoth, which didn't even flinch to cut down his arm. Stemmerlich became so desperate that he began to beg for his life, but that didn't stop Kurenzel from cutting him down to pieces with no remorse. After pledging to continue his holy crusade against the 6 other heroes, Kurenzel lost his demon and his consciousness along with it. Ott was surprised to see how light his body was, but Wide assured her that there's nothing to worry about. Even Shason assured her that he'll be fine, although his body is too thin by now. The squad can't afford to rest now, however, as the castle began to crumble by now, and leaving out of it is a must. Meanwhile, Jiren was holding Fargo's lifeless body in tears. After all, he believed that it was thanks to Fargo that he got a new chance to redeem himself in life after a long life of banditry. By the time Wide and Ott got back to him, Jiren seemed to have finally made up his mind and refused to flee, and the rest is history. Elsewhere, the Moon Priestess learned instantly of Stemmerlich's death, albeit she didn't know that it was him that perished among his peers. After confirming the validity of these claims, the priest decided to report this to the Emperor in person. With the lake's level decreasing due to the destruction underneath the castle, the guards stood oblivious to what happened as Wide and the others flew above them. A few days later, as the castle guards kept on investigating the outcome of this battle that they didn't know of, some of the nobles had already welcomed all the captains that came to the scene, where they decided to hold a mock funeral for Lord Landgrave, despite the fact that their bodies still not found. On top of that, it was also decided to take any measures to prevent any attempts to usurp the city's throne. Elsewhere, Pipi and Altia noticed that there's a funeral taking place, which they didn't take long for them to learn from random passers-by about the death of their beloved Lord Landgraves as well as Fargo, much to Altia's surprise. Pipi instantly figured out that it was all Kurenzel's doing, so she became giddy with delight. As the funeral passed before them, Zephy came out of nowhere to mourn Fargo. Pipi tried to stop him, but Altia stopped her, even though she was aware of the reality of the situation. While they were hugging one another, Wide came into the scene to take them to Kurenzel and Ott's hideout. Although he assured them that night that they're almost there, Pipi and Altia were acting the same way as Donkey from the movie Shrek, before finally making it to a cave where Ott was feeding a half-uncovered Kurenzel. Although relieved to see her brother fine, she was surprised to see that he shrunk in size, while I'm disappointed he didn't grow wider instead to end up a wide walking meme. Although he wasn't sure himself why did that even happen, he was glad to see himself well, with people that cared about him around him, assuring them that he'll be back in shape in no time. As for their current hideout, it was Kurenzel's idea to stay in this cave, since it was near a special place for him, a graveyard for valiant soldiers that he fought by their side. It was only then that Ott and Wide revealed to Altia and Pipi about Kurenzel's past, and the horrible events that he went through 20 years ago. Just as Kurenzel became satisfied after giving his prayers to his fallen comrades, Pipi alerted him to a bad surprise. The city's priests had just arrived with Stemmerlich's coffin to be buried here. Although this was frustrating for everyone including Kurenzel, the latter made it clear that he's still indeed a traitor that eliminated a hero, even though he's still going to carry on with the oath he made to get rid of the remaining 6 heroes. As such, he asked them to keep their distance from him for the foreseeable future. That night, while everyone was asleep, Pipi confessed her fears and concerns that she might be a hindrance for Kurenzel, only for Altia to assure her that despite her concerns being justifiable, she's not going to be the only one following Kurenzel because everyone else had already made up their minds to follow in her footsteps, including Ott, who confessed her final decision to Shason as well. Kurenzel left everyone at first light, or so he thought, as he saw Wide and Shason blocking his way, with Altia, Pipi and Ott joining them shortly. Seeing this, Kurenzel decided to let them tag along. Meanwhile, although reluctant, Rosen stood before Lord Glenn of the 7 heroes to inform him of Stemmerlich's fate. That night, at Badragravate Lemda, 2 ladies were prepared to send under Lord Bearstar. Once they were before him, and after taking a good look at them both, Bearstar drew his sword and slain one of the girls, as he alerted his subordinate that she's an assassin. Although the latter praised his lord for his quick wit, Bearstar was so paranoid that he seemed on the verge of snapping, especially after learning of what happened with Stemmerlech, and that he might very likely be the next on the chopping block. Simultaneously, Bearstar's army was carrying out a search order in the Demihuman's village, where it was going very violently already. After being asked by the village's elder, the army revealed that they're searching for a short lad, with braided hair and a scar on his left eye. Before they knew it, Kurenzel revealed himself and figured out their true intentions to sack the town, before eliminating them all with ease. At the city of Julas, Altia and a bartender were discussing the new developments in the city, where she learned that the guards are on top alert to the presence of a certain rebel, before attending to Ott and Peepee, who had just finished their performance to the public there. Once they've gathered in a relatively private space, Altia assured Peepee that she'll definitely get some proper clothing eventually, while apologizing to Tatria for overstaying their welcome there, which the latter dismissed as nothing. After all, Peepee's dancing there became the talk of the town. Peepee, however, didn't like being in this situation, and blamed it all on Kurenzel for leaving her behind. Speaking of Kurenzel, he was busy looking through his telescope while wearing his favorite femboy pajamas. Although ridiculous, it worked, as the city's bard believed he's dealing with a female. It didn't take Kurenzel long to figure out that the map is missing its northern part. But when the bard suggested he help him out with the missing part, Kurenzel refused, preferring to slowly gather intels instead. As for the bard, he got back to help with a performance at the bar, where one of the actors was supposed to represent Kurenzel when he eliminated Stemmerlech, much to Peepee, Altia and Ott's frustration, as they were fully aware of the entire truth. Ironically, this play had also upset the city's guards since they came to see Peepee and the others dance there, not to see their beloved Lord Stemmerlech's death getting mocked according to them. When the officer assumed that the actor was the actual person that is aiming for Lord Bearstar's head, he drew his sword and was on the verge of eliminating him, hadn't Ott stepped in just in time to save him, who in turn got saved by a knight called Ikphase. Ikphase tried to calm down the issue, which worked out well with the actors and Ott. The other guard, however, refused to listen to reason as he gathered his goons and tried to overrun Ikphase, which left him no option but to fight, badly but not fatally injuring them, before requesting from the bard to take the actor's mask with him. Outside the tavern, Kurenzel took notice of the commotion taking place. As Ikphase left the bar, he walked past Kurenzel and got a strange feeling about him, which he dismissed as he believed that he just walked past a girl. For his part, Kurenzel had also taken notice of Ikphase's hostility towards him for a split second. At first light, Ikphase arrived to meet Rosen on his ship. As they flew on board, the two discussed the news of Stemmerlech's death and the hero's killing rebel. As such, Rosen had requested help from 4 of the remaining hero's subordinates to hunt Kurenzel down, namely Elsaria, Eltsin, Darist and Kalkris. Ikphase laughed it off initially, until he heard that Rosen not only lost to him in a duel, but had lost his leg in the process, even though Kurenzel went easy on him. This disappointed Ikphase, as Rosen sent 4 oddballs to deal with Kurenzel instead of letting him handle the matter personally. Elsewhere, the city guards who had caused the commotion earlier got castigated by their superior, who was furious at the humiliation his troops suffered because of their own recklessness. As such, he outright broke the arm of one of the soldiers who just had their dislocated joints back in place. In his belief, a guard that can't do his duty doesn't deserve to be a guard. At the city's plaza, the city's mayor had managed to strike a deal with his counterpart, namely Elsaria and her goons, to ensure that her business and free city proceeds smoothly, when they suddenly had a boulder thrown at them. Although the lady was not harmed, she was not pleased by the fact that her drink got ruined by some debris. It turned out that Batarigravate had amassed a colossal force against the free city, under suspicion for sheltering a wanted person. The mayor was apoplectic by these allegations, but the Bearstar's men's minds were fixated on getting their revenge after yesterday's humiliation. As such, they threatened to obliterate the city to rubble if he failed to hand over Kurenzel. This didn't sit well with Elsaria, who went as far as to call these uncouth barbarians for what they are. So after introducing herself and her fellows as members of the Order of the Seven Spears, she ordered her counterpart to withdraw immediately in exchange for her turning a blind eye over his uncivilized behavior. Everyone were initially confused by who Elsaria is, but when they learned that she's the daughter of an elector, which is the position of one of the families that elects an emperor, as it was the case in the HRE for a millennia, the commanders abided by her orders instantly and withdrew, with Elsaria promising that she'll be in charge of the research herself, as long as the guards do their job in monitoring every movement in the city and not cause any trouble. Elsaria's acquired status wasn't baseless. After all, she managed with her men to quell an armed rebellion in one of the Empire's fortresses about 2 years ago, thus giving her a reputation of a decisive yet ruthless commander. As such, it gave hope to Rosen that she could, with her men, take down Kurenzel. This sounded impressive to Ickphase, but wasn't enough to convince him that he's able to get rid of Kurenzel personally. Although Rosen was taken aback by this bold claim for a moment, he still refused. Back in the city, Pipi was growing increasingly concerned about Kurenzel's delay when Elsria and her fellow adventurers forced their way into her room. Seeing that it's going to get dark soon, and with their search for today not bearing any meaningful results, Elsria agrees to head back home, but not before she gets Elson to cease simping over Pipi's very specific race, by forcing him to leave the room immediately. Before they'd finally taken their leave, their fairy began to glow, indicating something for them, which made everyone leave without a word for the time being. Pipi also was aware that this fairy is after Kurenzel, and with Kurenzel being nearby, she felt the necessity to look for Ott and Altia to inform them. Kurenzel also was aware of the dilemma he's in, but before he could find a solution for his problems, he found himself before Elsria and her men, thus making a fight between them inevitable. Elsria and her men attacked Kurenzel immediately, but the latter managed to fend off their attacks with relative ease. Although he was taken aback by the fact they were sent by Rosen, Kurenzel wasn't willing to go down anytime soon. While this fight was taking place, Ickphase and Rosen arrived at the former's house. To everyone's surprise, Lord Glenn in person was practicing his swordsmanship. Although this came as a surprise for everyone in the camp, Ickphase's attack against Glenn was even more surprising, even though Glenn repelled it with ease. Seeing that people are not familiar with him, Ickphase introduced himself as Glenn's slave, even though he was aware that this might upset people of higher social status than him. Aside from that, Glenn revealed that he's going to deal with something related to the prophecy, but he's still going to entrust Ickphase with something he's been eager to deal with. After revealing that he knew all about the murder of Stemmerlech and the hero's killer on the loose, Glenn saw no need to further discuss the matter. As such, he ordered Ickphase to bring him Kurenzel's head. Hearing this, Ickphase gratefully accepted. This didn't sit well with the noble officers, as they deemed themselves worthy of doing this task instead of a slave. Other officers, however, couldn't help but think that Glenn's decision was prudent, since Ickphase, although they didn't know much about him, had proven himself time and again to be a reliable asset for Glenn, to the point he's considered as the person that will revive the crest they've sought to forget 2 decades ago, as well as becoming the Empire's Blattmeister, and the right to inherit the Black Sword and the Sword Crest. From a distance, Glenn was watching other students practicing their swordsmanship, when he asked Glee if she still resented him for eliminating Ascheriit. For her part, Glee admitted that until her last breath, she's going to grieve him. After all, Ascheriit had reached great heights at the age of 16 that not even Blattmeister Ludwig reached in a lifetime. Amidst that, Glee couldn't help but remember the good old days. As Ascheriit left the city for battle, the mood in the city was that of glory and optimism, as bards were singing about how the heroes of the Empire were slaying their enemies and thwarting their schemes, while naming their names proudly: Glenn, Lebelond, Escudian, Gullingerv, Stemmerlech, Nergenfold, Bearstar, and, yeah, these were the only heroes that got named. Glee was shocked by that, but what was more shocking to her was hearing that there were 4 traitors that got promptly executed. Since then, Glee could think not of that very day in any way other than unfathomable, because there's no way her beloved student could betray the Empire. Seeing that his master was not buying his story, Glenn decided to finally spill the beans. His reasoning to eliminate Ascheriit was none other than envy and jealousy. I'm telling you, these 7 heroes are pathetic, especially after tricking Ascheriit and 3 other heroes into a trap, where they got promptly executed and their reputation tarnished, just to cover up for their sorry excuse. Although the 4 had struck a deal with Wishtek, it was to put an end to this war that was turning against the Empire at that point. Glenn, however, out of utter spite and petty jealousy, decided to tarnish Ascheriit's legacy on top of murdering him. Hearing this, Glee became livid. Although her instructions for him were of little to no help to his natural talent, she was the one that raised Ascheriit and grew closer to him over time. Aware that any retaliatory actions she might have against Glenn could be a death wish for her, Glee decided not to take any actions against him, because she was also thankful that he was the one that brought her Ickphase, whom she raised personally as well. Meanwhile, Kurenzel was still having a rough time against Elsria and the others. Just as he began to regret switching his entire fighting gear for this disguise he's wearing, Ott arrived to his assistance. Elsria asked her politely to scram, only for Ott to insist to stand by Kurenzel's side, acknowledging her awareness of what he did so far, as well as the atrocities that Stemmerlech had committed in the name of justice, before promptly attacking Elsria. Seeing that persuading her out of battle isn't a viable option, Elsria made for an obvious choice. Ott was well aware that Kurenzel didn't want to get any of his new-made allies to get harmed because of him. She still insisted on fighting by his side. After all, who wouldn't be honored for fighting by a true warrior's side? Despite that, Kurenzel wasn't eager to have someone else fight by his side, as his concern for her safety made Ott into a liability for him more than an asset. Her recklessness and lack of awareness of her surroundings got one of her subordinates to land a hit on her. Fortunately for her, Kurenzel jumped immediately to her rescue, just as Altia and Pipi were on the way to help them escape. Elsria tried to stop them, but failed at that. Learning that Eltsin's fairy Sufi had memorized the scent of the rebel and his companions, Elsria swore an oath to never let them escape. Meanwhile, Altia was leading the others to relative safety when Kurenzel asked Ott to head back home, for her presence was a burden to him in battle rather than a liability. Elsewhere, Lord Bearstar learned of his men's failure in keeping their position as protectors of Free City, and he was livid by how his orders got toppled by the daughter of an elector, in his domain no less. Not wanting his reputation to get tarnished any further, Bearstar ordered the destruction of the entirety of Julas Oblast. As for Kurenzel, he managed to make it to a safe location underground with his comrades, where they tended to Ott's wound. Altia suggested they remain hidden where they are. Kurenzel, however, refused, as he was well aware that as long as he's in the city, Elsria and her men will track him down time and time again until they take him down. Hearing this, Altia suggested his real identity be revealed in public. Kurenzel refused that too, fearing that the town will be considered by the Empire as a hub for insurgency, which will expose the citizens here to more danger. With everyone gone, Kurenzel remained with Ott for a while, where he complimented her for being a brave and a strong fighter, with a huge room for improvement, which is why he doesn't want to see her getting eliminated. As a result of that, Kurenzel decided to leave the city after bidding Ott farewell. Ott tried to get herself to move to accompany him, but couldn't move a muscle. On his way out of the city, Kurenzel couldn't help but think of how things could have gone if the Seven Heroes' betrayal didn't take place before getting back to his senses, where the hopes he had for a bright future are now shattered beyond repair. Amidst this avalanche, the civilians could do nothing but run for their lives, while Kurenzel took shelter in a random balcony, where he tended to Ott's wounds. Hearing that he's proud of her performance in this last fight, Ott became incredibly happy that she ended up breathing her last breath there. Not wanting her to lose her life while merely starting her journey to greatness, Kurenzel decided to offer a part of his own life force to her, which she began battling to accept his own blood. Just as the fiery arrows stopped falling upon the city, the soldiers started seizing whatever valuables they could lay their hands on. This was a great sight for their commander when Elsria, who was disgusted by this sight, ordered him to get his men to leave everything they've looted and withdraw immediately. This time his fellow commander, yes, the one that broke his soldier's arm a few days ago, refused to comply with Elsria's warning, claiming that he's fulfilling Lord Bearstar's order to capture the rebel that this city has been refuging. Of course, this is utter nonsense and there's no proof to back it up, but the commander still carried on with the mission anyway, admitting to his comrade that they'll execute the city's mayor and report that they've eliminated all sorts of resistance in the city. This infuriated Elsria, especially that any actions taken against Lord Bearstar's army will be considered as an act of treason to the Empire. Seeing that she's sitting idle, the army were ordered to resume their advance on the city's mansion. For now, all Elsria could do is think of a way to save the city. Meanwhile, Kurenzel was worried that his attempt to save Ott would go in vain, only to be relieved shortly after that she survived. Once she woke up, Kurenzel ordered her to rest until the moon gave her full power. On the other hand, Altia met up with her connections from this city, who advised her to take shelter inside the city's mansion, completely unaware that Bearstar's army were on their way there to sack it. Before they could get there, the Free City guards were already divided, by either standing with Bearstar's side or making their last stand against them, which almost evolved into a fight. Fortunately for them, Altia arrived just in time to stop them. Since leaders of both factions were on amicable terms with her, they tried to convince her that fighting the other side is the only option to decide the city's fate, but Altia was having none of it. Seeing that the army is not stopping their march towards the mansion, Elsria had enough and asked Darius to reveal the plan he had been thinking of. To everyone's surprise, Darius thought of one possible option to force the army into a ceasefire, which is through eliminating Lord Bearstar. This put Elsria between a rock and a hard place. Because she was bound to protect the Empire and its citizens, Elsria had vowed to protect them. But now she's on the verge of rebelling against the Empire she's so desperately trying to protect from one of its proclaimed heroes. Meanwhile, Bearstar's generals were having mixed feelings, as the adjutant was relieved that the damage caused to the city is relatively minimal. The older man, however, found that this approach was boring, so he used Bearstar's vague order to search for the rebel as an excuse to liquidate the city and turn it into rubble. Not bearing to see the unarmed and innocent civilians getting eliminated, Elsria decided to finally step in their defense, but her comrades stopped her from doing so, until Kurenzel came in to save a boy that was about to get eliminated. His presence, as well as having him reveal himself as the hero-killing rebel, had made the entire force before him motionless, despite their supervisor's orders to attack him. When Kurenzel mocked their hesitance to attack him while being so eager to sack an armless city, however, they finally moved to attack him. This would prove to be their undoing, as Kurenzel managed to cut them down to a man, including their supervisor. Understandably, this was a bad surprise for Bearstar's generals. To make matters worse, they were informed that the Vigilante Corps and armed civilians had united in force to fight the Lord's army. Indeed, this newly established force, with Altia's support, had made a number over the pillaging army. Despite pleas for her to evacuate the city immediately, Altia insisted on fighting by this city's side, since she was hoping to redeem herself after not caring much about people's future when she was smuggling them out before. By now, the Lord's army began to lose heart and started to flee the city, as Kurenzel inflicted horrendous casualties in their ranks, much to Elsria's surprise. However, she was also aware that Kurenzel was starting to become increasingly tired. As such, she decided to join him in fending off the pillagers, not that she was willing to ally with him, that is. Before she could make any move, however, Ott arrived to offer her assistance to Kurenzel. Having her join Kurenzel's side broke the pillagers' ranks, as they began to rout. Before they knew it, Elsria and her goons joined the fight piecemeal. Seeing this, the older general left his younger comrade to reorganize the army's ranks just as he fled through his dragon. The younger fella tried his best to motivate his routed army's ranks, even going as far as to punch some of them down, but ended up joining them at the site of the force or the Vigilante Corps, who eventually surrounded the siege tower and occupied it. Before they knew it, a large beam of light showed up, before transforming into a laser beam that destroyed everything in its wake. This was a bad surprise for the Vigilante Corps, as Lord Bearstar had finally showed up, with a huge floating magic artillery. This was also a bad surprise for Elsria, as she still couldn't comprehend why Bearstar would go as far as to bring his wicked copy of Shemerlech's magical artillery to bring the innocent civilians no less. On the other hand, Kurenzel was relieved to see this castle, as Bearstar had now spared Kurenzel the effort of looking for him. Ott was on the same page as her Kurenzel when it came to infiltrating the castle. Before they could do that, however, they still needed to deal with some company that came out of the castle. Seeing that reinforcements had arrived, Walj, yes, they just remembered to mention his name now, was ecstatic, and was about to carry the order of regrouping the remaining squadrons in preparation for a counterattack, hadn't Bearstar wiped out the elephants in the city blindly. The castle's crew were aware that they're also attacking their friends down below, and urged their lord to reconsider. Bearstar, however, remained arrogantly indifferent to their fate, since he's free to do as he pleases in his domain. Seeing that he's now under attack, Walj began to run away, only to find himself standing before Elsria, who's now interrogating him for more information about Bearstar's floating castle. He initially tried to escape, only to fail at that miserably. Elsewhere, one of the leaders of the Vigilante Corps realized the size of destruction that came upon the city from the last few attacks that Bearstar launched upon the city. Just as he was about to lose his life from a piece of rubble falling upon him, Kurenzel and Ott arrived for his rescue, as they instructed him to cripple the enemy dragons. The fella took a while to process that he was just saved by some demi-human kids when the duo decided to rush back to the fight. That night, the Vigilante Corps switched their priorities from attacking Bearstar's army to ensuring civilian safety. It wasn't going smoothly, however, as some of the civilians still believed that Lord Bearstar was coming to their rescue, although the latter was watching the city burn in ecstasy from his floating castle. Amidst this chaos, Kurenzel managed to get in range to the flying soldiers, where he drew his black sword and cut them down, with Ott following suit. As he stood atop a building while being surrounded by more enemy dragons, the city's people began to call Kurenzel for what he is, a hero. Not wanting to sit idle, the militia decided to attack the dragons, which worked out well. Before he knew it, Kurenzel bore witness to people praising him as their hero. That was the least of his concerns for now, however, as he still needed to infiltrate the castle and eliminate Bearstar before he could inflict any more casualties upon the city. As such, he jumped on the back of Ott's dragon and headed there instantly. The general tried to get his men to stop him, but failed at that. If that wasn't bad enough, he became furious when he saw Elsria's flagship floating over the city, with Walj being tied down. However, Bearstar was ecstatic to see it, as he has been seeking to seize it for a long while by now. In fact, Bearstar was holding a grudge for years against Glenn since he was denied the opportunity to build a flagship of his own, and to add insult to injury, the Emperor decided that the ship must be built in Bearstar's domain. Since then, he has been secretly working to seize the ship. For Bearstar, he's an equal to Glenn. After all, he was one of the most active people in their betrayal for their four comrades, as he fed the idea that they deserve more attention and prestige to his co-conspirators. While this scumbag kept on contemplating how to shift the blame over Free City's citizens, Kurenzel and his comrades, Kurenzel and Ott, were getting ever closer to the castle. Although it wasn't an easy feat, they were ultimately successful in reaching their destination. Bearstar was surprised by that, so he decided to obliterate them with his colossal magic artillery, which narrowly missed the duo and the flagship. Once the attack was dodged, Elsa figured out how to be in control of the ship's cannon. Before they could start their assault on the castle, Ascheriit had contemplated her decision for a while. She was well aware that her men would definitely figure a way out of this mess, but since she's the daughter of an elector, her predicament will be much more difficult to get over. Despite her position, however, Ascheriit had proved her mettle. Since the Rubicon had been crossed for her, she ordered that the assault commence. Meanwhile, the general kept on flying on his own around the flagship, as he became well aware that he cannot take it to the floating castle on his own, even ignoring Walj, who was begging him to save his life. It didn't take long for karma to bite him back, as he got caught in the firing shot of the flagship before it hit the floating castle. Saddened by the fact that his beloved ship is firing at him, Bearstar ordered his men to fire back at it, only for Ascheriit to dodge the incoming attack. Amidst this battle, Kurenzel managed to get close enough to jump towards Bearstar's window, where he managed to break in easily with his black sword. While Bearstar was desperately trying to run for his life, Ikphase and Rosen were on their way to Free City, hoping that they'd get a share of the glory in taking down Kurenzel, assuming that Ascheriit and her men were hot on his tail already. By the time they arrived in Free City, Rosen was shocked by the utter destruction that came upon it, as well as the sight of the floating castle. If that wasn't enough, Ikphase revealed that he heard rumors that Bearstar was constructing a castle in a secret location, and didn't know of the validity of these claims until this very moment. Ikphase, however, didn't care of what may happen to Bearstar, as he believed that if he could take down a rebel that managed to eliminate two heroes, then his prestige would be even greater. For now, aware that Kurenzel and Ascheriit were hot on his tail, Bearstar rushed his way to the last remaining pod to evacuate the castle. Seeing that the flagship is about to fire at them, the men entered it chaotically, and didn't care of letting anyone else enter, even if it was Lord Bearstar in person. With the pod out of the castle, and the flagship firing its shot, Bearstar found himself standing face to face with Kurenzel. After recollecting some past memories with how his father encouraged him to enlist to become a hero of the Empire, after figuring out that he's too much of a loser to become a successful merchant like all of his siblings, and after remembering how many times have he been carried by Ascheriit in fights, just like how anyone would carry a toxic Draven player, Bearstar lost what little sanity he had left, as he began to talk to Ascheriit, which had shocked Kurenzel initially. Bearstar begged him to spare his life and let him go back home work with his father, but the Rubicon has been crossed long ago, and Kurenzel had made up his mind as he slain Bearstar, who had the audacity to show Kurenzel around when he had lost sight of his way home. In the wake of his assassination, the floating castle kept on falling. Ikphase noticed Kurenzel standing next to Bearstar's corpse. Once he landed, Rosen begged Kurenzel to put an end to his killing spree. Kurenzel refused, only for Ikphase to renounce him for his decision, making it clear that having Kurenzel finished off by his, or rather Ikphase's hands, will further increase his prestige before unsheathing his sword. After getting alarmed at his stance, Kurenzel began to fight back, as he kept on noticing the resemblance between his fighting style and Glee's. For his part, Ikphase was impressed by how good a fighter Kurenzel was, and couldn't help but ask him to draw his black sword, as he declared that the first thing he'll do after earning his freedom by eliminating Kurenzel will be working his way to inherit the black sword and the sword crest. Seeing that Kurenzel wasn't eager to oblige, Ikphase began to try to push Kurenzel to introduce who he really is. Rosen, on the other hand, seemed to have figured out the latter's identity, as he became well aware that this ongoing fight is a tragic one between two of the most renowned swordsmen in the Empire's history. Despite being able to keep up with his counterpart, Kurenzel wasn't having an easy time as his body began to weaken. Ikphase was well aware of that, as he unleashed one decisive attack that left Kurenzel on his knees. It turned out that Ikphase had used the Black Wing technique, which he admittedly still has not mastered. Despite the ferocity of the attack, Kurenzel stood up to fight once more, this time with him putting his sword down without letting go of it. As Ikphase was on the verge of launching his attack, the moonlight reached Kurenzel. Rosen warned Ikphase from what is to come, but it was a little too late, as Ikphase was on the verge of delivering the coup de grace on Kurenzel. The latter launched a powerful attack of his own, that he broke Ikphase's sword and body shield, before telling him that the only thing that's preventing him from mastering the Black Wing sword technique is none other than his own hesitation. Once Kurenzel was done telling him that advice, the castle began to crumble. Fortunately for him, Ott arrived, so he rushed to her location, but not before saying goodbye to Ikphase. However, the mood was entirely different for Ichphase, as he was well aware that what Kurenzel had performed was the Black Wing technique, which made him cry at the fact that despite a coup de grace being delivered upon him, Kurenzel refused to use it to eliminate Ichphase. With this fight finally over, it took a while for the aftermath of it to transpire. For starters, Elsa and her men got confined by the Order of the Seven Spear. Seeing that she still insisted that she did what she thought was right, her tutor warned her from ever defying the Empire ever again. She was only spared this once because she's an elector's daughter, but if it were to happen again, the results will include her 3 comrades losing their heads. While she was frustrated by the decision to be confined, her 3 goons had arrived to ensure her their full support before helping her escape. Her tutor tried to stop her from doing so, only for him to get punched in the face by this young lady. The other soldiers tried to warn her that her father will suffer the consequences of her decisions, only for her to tell them that they're no different than Bearstar's soldiers, who unsheathed their weapons against the people they swore to protect, before she passed by them with no resistance. This perhaps had sealed her and her friends' fates, but they all believed that they'd done the right thing. Underneath the Elector's castle, Walj was sitting alone in his prison cell, when a subordinate of his, named Polvik, came to his rescue from underground, although he needed to be saved from the hole he dug first. Once that's dealt with, the duo did what your average Joseph Joestar fanboy would. Although their lord is a goner, one of his nobles remained eager to collect the remnants of Bearstar's army to absorb his possessions. Despite that, Walj wasn't as optimistic as his comrade, since he was aware that all odds are stacked against them by now, and any attempts to restore Bearstar's glorious days will only get them so far. Polvik, however, assured him that they still have an ace up their sleeve, which revolves around a monster that the Lord had been possessing for a while, and it had already been launched on Free City. What they didn't know, however, was that a bad surprise awaits them both. Elsewhere, the citizens of Free City were looking at the new flag they created for their hero with pride. Their happiness couldn't last forever, however, as one of Bearstar's men, named Algro, brought up some men to disperse the happy crowd and take down their flag. Frustrated by the crowd's clear defiance to his order, Algro ordered his son, which looks like that Halo Brute meme, to massacre them. Just as he was about to do so, Kurenzel arrived like an Uno reverse, cutting his hammer and having it thrown at the soldiers. Algro ordered his son to still attack, but seeing that his armor got cut in half, he retreated to where the corpses of his comrades were and laid there. Before he knew it, Algro witnessed Ott arriving where Kurenzel was atop a dragon. Seeing this, the remaining soldiers routed immediately, with Algro and his brute son following suit. With this loser out of the scene, Kurenzel approached the flag, unheeding the townsfolk's warm welcomes, before taking it down and leaving the city with Ott. Elsewhere, Plokov and Waljer were seeing a pretender enticing and daring the soldiers to join ranks to absorb the fractured domain of Bearstar, before starting to use some uncle-style spells from Jackie Chan. If Waljer's skepticism wasn't bad enough, Elsria's arrival with her men had put an effective end to their cause for good. With their plans in shambles, Waljer began to wonder where the mage was, only to see him fleeing the scene in a panic, confessing that he was no sorcerer. Before Elsria could get to capture him, the pretender got caught by an octopus monster, or rather by Jiren, who turned into some sort of chimera. While Altia and Pipi were discussing what their next course of action with Kurenzel should be, Jiren merged from underground, much to Pipi's delight. It turned out that the tentacles that Fargo were in possession of previously had crawled into Jiren's body, which saved his life from the mansion's collapse. As such, Jiren considered this as a second chance for him to atone for Fargo's sins. Although he was ashamed of this body, Pipi assured him to not be, as she was proud of his good intentions and his will to use this newly established power for the good of the people. Aside from that, Pipi requested from Altia to go on a journey with her to spread happiness over the Empire. Altia agreed, with Jiren volunteering to join them, while Elsria was so moved by this suggestion, just like her comrades, so much that she decided to tag along with the trio. As for Kurenzel, Ott learned that he's certain that he didn't want to say goodbye to his former comrades, since that will make it very difficult for them, just as much as it will be for him to move forward. With that, both sides finally started their separate journeys. That concludes the anime recap. As always, if you enjoyed, let me know down below and I'm out.